Welcome back, everyone. Before we dive in, make sure you drop your thoughts and the lessons you took from this story in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe. Let's get into it. My name is Rochelle Holloway. I am 37 years old, a full-time pediatric nurse, and for nearly a decade I had been the person making my household run. The mortgage, the groceries, the utilities, the endless invisible labor that keeps a family from coming apart at the seams. For the last 3 years, since my daughter Amara was born, there had been daycare tuition, pediatric bills, backup sitters, and all the small emergencies children bring. So when I opened a baby monitor app in a hotel room in Nashville and saw my husband walking another woman through my house like she belonged there, I did not scream. I went cold first. The detail I remembered later was not cruelty. It was coffee. Derek had set the pot to brew before I came downstairs, which meant he had remembered I needed to leave before sunrise for my nursing leadership conference. The coffee was hot. My travel mug sat beside it on the counter. He had not filled it for me. That was the kind of husband he had become. Thoughtful enough to create the appearance of care, careful enough to leave the actual labor to me. It was 5:14 in the morning. My conference bag was already packed because I always packed the night before. I had my workshop scrubs, my evening clothes, my continuing education folder, and my badge lanyard clipped to the zipper. I do not forget things. I build systems so I do not have to. Before I left, I went upstairs to check on Amara. I always paused on the third stair because it creaked, then touched her doorframe before stepping into the room. She was asleep on her back with one arm flung over her head, the same way she had slept since infancy. I kissed her forehead and breathed in that soft mix of baby wash and clean cotton that only exists in a child's room before dawn. She did not stir. I stood there a few seconds longer than necessary, then went back downstairs and picked up my bag. That was who I was by then. Tender in private. Efficient in motion. Competence disappears when you do it long enough. People get used to the result and stop seeing the effort. For almost 10 years, I had been the one catching every loose thread before it became a problem. I paid bills on time. I remembered deadlines. I scheduled repairs before something broke. After Amara was born, the list only got heavier. For the last 3 years, I had worked extra shifts to cover daycare, school deposits, groceries, and those months when Derek said his numbers were down and his commissions were late. I carried the older burdens of marriage and the newer burdens of motherhood at the same time, and I carried them so steadily that even Derek had started treating that steadiness like a law of nature. He had opinions about what that steadiness did to me. Mostly my body, sometimes my face. After the baby, he developed a way of saying things that sounded harmless if you ignored the timing. He once told me I used to be more spontaneous when I turned down a last-minute dinner because I had a 6 o'clock shift the next morning. On another night, when I had been awake nearly 20 hours, he said he felt like I was never really present anymore. The line that stayed with me was softer and meaner at the same time. He said I had this serious face, like everything was a problem to solve. He said it to the woman who had been solving his problems for years. There had been a time when I thought I knew him all the way through. Back in our first duplex, before the house, before the daycare invoices and split calendars and exhaustion that made whole weeks blur together, Derek used to fry catfish on Sunday afternoons in the cast-iron skillet his mother gave him. Frankie Beverly played from a small speaker in the kitchen window. I would sit on the counter and watch him dust the fillets in cornmeal and think, this is the one. We ate on the couch because we did not own a dining table yet. The walls were thin. The place was small. None of that mattered to me then because I believed I was standing inside a simple, honest life. I loved that version of him long after he stopped being that man. Before I left for the airport, I checked the baby monitor. My mother-in-law had given it to us the previous Christmas after Amara's winter ear infections turned me into a woman who could not sleep without listening for a cough. The camera sat high on a bookshelf across from the crib, angled mostly toward the bed, but wide enough to catch the strip of hallway visible through the nursery door. I kept the microphone sensitivity turned up because I wanted to hear her breathing if she got congested. That morning I confirmed the feed was live, watched her chest rise once on the screen, then locked the front door and got into the rideshare waiting outside. Derek stayed in bed. I did not wake him. He did not ask me to. At the gate, I opened the banking app the way I always did when I had a few minutes to myself. It was habit more than suspicion, the financial equivalent of checking a monitor before a shift begins. One charge stopped me. $312 at Fieldcrest Bistro on Fieldcrest Avenue in Oak Brook, 2 nights earlier. The name meant nothing to me. Derek had told me he worked late that Tuesday and ate at his desk. I remember looking at the charge and turning it over in my mind without quite lifting it into alarm. People forget to mention dinners. Charges happen. My boarding group was called, and I slipped the phone back into my bag. By then the story had already started. I just did not know I was inside it. The conference in Nashville was useful, the kind of long day that leaves you mentally full and physically worn out. 8 hours of sessions on pediatric protocols, staffing shortages, nurse leadership, and retention. I took notes through all of it because information is light to carry and expensive to need later. By the time I got back to my hotel room, my feet hurt and room service had delivered a sad little salad that tasted like it had been assembled by someone annoyed at food. I ate it anyway. At 9:47, out of habit, I opened the monitor app to check on Amara before I went to bed. The nursery loaded first. Dark room. Nightlight glow. Amara asleep on her back, one hand open against the sheet. For 1 second, everything was ordinary. Then the motion bar flashed. Light spilled across the narrow strip of hallway outside her room. Derek crossed the frame first with his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. A woman followed him. She was younger than me, hair pulled up, dark fitted dress, the kind of ease in her body that tells you immediately she is not uncertain about being there. She did not move like a guest. That was the first thing I knew. She moved like someone already familiar with his space. I leaned forward so fast I knocked the salad lid to the carpet. Derek passed the nursery, then came back through the frame toward the kitchen. The woman stopped at Amara's doorway and looked in. She did not glance and keep walking. She stood there. The nursery door was open wider than usual, and because I kept the microphone sensitivity turned high, the sound carried farther than it should have. I heard Derek say I would not be back until Sunday. I heard him say they had time. The woman asked if he was sure. Derek laughed. Then she called him babe, and he answered by calling her Tanya. That was when I started recording. The monitor app automatically stored motion clips in the cloud, but I wanted my own saved copy of the exact stretch with the timestamp visible in the corner, so I turned on screen recording and captured what I was seeing as it happened. Tanya turned enough for the angle to catch her face clearly. Derek put his hand on her waist as they moved out of frame. The timestamp read 9:52 p.m. I kept the phone steady until they disappeared down the hall. Then I stopped the recording, checked that it had saved, and downloaded the motion clips from the app into a private folder on my phone. My hands were calm. My pulse was not. I booked the first flight home the next morning. One way. No checked bag. Then I reopened the banking app and went back 6 months instead of 1. I traced every charge the way I would trace a symptom in a chart, backward until the pattern appeared. 11 charges I could not honestly explain. Fieldcrest Bistro. A wine bar in Naperville. Florist purchases that had never become flowers in my home. 2 hotel valet fees. A jewelry store charge that had not become any piece of jewelry in my possession. The amounts were never large enough to cause a scene, which told me more than the charges themselves. This had not been sloppy. It had been managed. On the flight home, I made 2 lists. The first was what I need. Under it I typed, complete banking records, phone logs from the shared plan, any documents he has moved off our common desk, full timeline, someone I trust, attorney referral. The second was what I will not do. I wrote, cry in front of him, accuse without proof, disturb anything I cannot replace exactly, move before I know the full shape of it. I did not rehearse speeches. I did not imagine a dramatic confrontation. I know the difference between action and performance. I had no interest in performance. During my layover, I called my best friend Claudette Barnes. We had met in nursing school and kept each other alive through the first years of work and adulthood. I did not tell her everything from the jet bridge. I said only that I had come home early and needed her to be available this week because something serious had happened. There was one quiet beat on the line. Then Claudette asked what I needed first. Not what happened. Not whether I was all right in that performative way people ask when they really want details. She asked what I needed. That was how I knew I had called the right person. I got home at 10:43 in the morning and sat in the rideshare for exactly 90 seconds before opening the door. Derek's car was in the driveway. Inside, the house was too clean. Not family clean. Not ordinary Saturday clean. It was the kind of clean that feels like someone trying to erase evidence from the air itself. Counters wiped. Floors done. Fresh candle burning in the scent I only used for company. Windows cracked open to move the house smell out. Derek stood in the kitchen when I walked in. Surprise hit his face first. Then calculation. He said he thought the conference ran through Sunday. I told him it ended early. Amara came flying out of the living room and hit me in the knees so hard I had to crouch to catch her. I held her longer than usual and pressed my face into her hair while she patted my shoulders with those impatient little hands children use when they love you and still want to keep moving. Derek said I should have called so he could pick me up. I told him I knew. Then I spent the next hour being normal on purpose. I made Amara lunch. I sorted the laundry basket by the bedroom door. I moved through my own house like I belonged there, because I did, and I was not going to let my shock drive me out of rooms I had paid for. Derek's jacket hung over the bedroom chair. Checking pockets before laundry was a habit I had because once, years earlier, he had put a phone through the washer and acted like we had both suffered the loss equally. My fingers found a folded receipt in the inside pocket. I opened it carefully. Fieldcrest Bistro, Fieldcrest Avenue, Oak Brook. Dinner for two. $148 after tip. Same date as the larger charge I saw at the airport, which told me the bill had been split between two forms of payment, or he had paid twice that night. I took a photo, returned the receipt exactly as I found it, and carried the laundry to the hamper. Later, while changing the sheets, I saw a glossy brochure corner sticking out from under Derek's side of the mattress. I slid it free with 2 fingers. New townhouse development in Plainfield, about 40 minutes from our house. 1 model unit circled in blue ink. Notes in the margin about school ratings, highway access, estimated payments. Not our handwriting together. His alone. He had not simply betrayed me. He had been studying an exit route. I slid the brochure back into place and stood there looking at the bed, thinking about the nerve it takes to map out a second life while sleeping in the one your wife is financing. That first night home, after Amara was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table and built a cleaner timeline. I copied the monitor clips into a secure drive I had created on the flight home using an old email address Derek did not know existed. I changed the password twice. I matched the suspicious charges to dates on our calendar. I did not confront him. Over the next 3 days, I acted exactly like myself. I packed lunches. I asked about meetings. I folded tiny socks. Derek did not alter his routine at all. That told me almost as much as the video did. He believed he was still safe. On the 4th day, I drove to Claudette's house with the screen recording saved in 2 places and the questionable charges printed on 1 sheet. She had already set coffee on the table and cleared space on the couch for papers. That small readiness almost undid me more than the video had. I showed her the recording without introduction. I watched her face instead of the screen because I had already memorized the screen. The moment Tanya paused in Amara's doorway, Claudette's expression changed. Not surprise exactly. Recognition sharpened by dread. When the clip ended, Claudette sat very still for several seconds before telling me something I was not going to like. 8 months earlier, after a Saturday shift, she had seen Derek on the patio at Riverside Chop House with a woman. She had been parked across the street and only caught pieces of it. A touch on his forearm. His body leaning in too close for colleagues. The 2 of them leaving together. She had not heard them speak. She had not been fully certain. Then her sister's cancer treatment started the next week, and life narrowed to hospitals, medication lists, and fear. By the time she could think clearly again, shame had settled over the silence. She apologized without excusing herself. I heard her. I did not soften it. The worst detail came next. Claudette knew Tanya's name. Derek worked in healthcare supply sales for a company that handled medication systems and service contracts for several hospitals in our region. Tanya worked for the same company as an account analyst on 2 hospital systems tied to Derek's portfolio, including a network where Claudette and I both picked up continuing education events. At a vendor reception in the spring, Claudette passed close enough to hear Tanya laughing about Derek's wife. She said I was always working. She said I was too serious. She said it casually, like my labor and my exhaustion were personality defects instead of the structure holding my household up. I asked how long Claudette thought it had really been going on. She said she could only stand behind 8 months because that was what she had personally seen. But women do not walk into a child's doorway with that kind of ease at month 1. I agreed. Then I told her I was not doing anything loud until I had the full financial picture. Because if Derek had been building a second life while I covered the first one, that mattered just as much as the affair. Claudette reached for her phone before I finished. She gave me the number of a family law attorney named Vanessa Price who had handled hidden asset cases for women in their hospital network. Claudette said Vanessa was sharp, precise, and unimpressed by theatrics. That sounded exactly right to me. My appointment with Vanessa happened that Friday in an office above a bank in Wheaton. She had a calm face, a clean desk, and the kind of listening style that made me speak carefully because I could tell she would notice if I exaggerated even once. I gave her the short version first. Video evidence. Questionable spending. Townhouse brochure. Likely work policy issue because the other woman was on Derek's account chain. Vanessa asked only clarifying questions. Had I entered any password-protected account that was not mine? No. Had I copied only documents from shared spaces or joint accounts? Yes. Good, she said. Keep it that way. Vanessa explained that cheating itself would not decide everything, but dissipation of marital assets absolutely mattered, especially if one spouse had been diverting money while the other covered core family expenses. She told me to gather only what I could access lawfully: joint bank statements, credit card records, tax returns, phone logs from our shared family plan, mortgage records, daycare invoices, insurance documents, and any physical paperwork left in the house that was not protected. She also told me not to warn him. Men willing to hide money are often willing to move it faster once they know they are being watched. I nearly smiled at that word. Instead, I wrote it down. Over the next 2 weeks, I lived 2 lives inside one body. On the surface, I was still the wife Derek thought he knew. Tired, dependable, not asking too many questions. Underneath that, I became exact. I downloaded 12 months of statements from the joint account and the shared credit card. I pulled our wireless logs and flagged one number that appeared over and over after 11 p.m. and during his supposed late meetings. I matched that number to Tanya's full name through the company directory. I found 3 restaurant charges he had submitted for reimbursement through work on nights he told me he had eaten alone. I found a valet claim tied to a boutique hotel he had described as a client lunch. Saturday morning, Bertie called. Bertie was Derek's aunt, 61 years old, retired from teaching, and one of the few people in his family who had always treated me like more than the woman who kept him organized. She asked if we could meet for coffee, just the 2 of us. There was strain under the request, the kind that told me whatever she had been holding was old enough to be heavy. We met at a diner in Glen Ellen that still had laminated menus and booths high enough to make a hard conversation feel private. Bertie sat down, wrapped both hands around her mug, and started crying before she drank a sip. Derek had come to her in September. He said things were not right between us. He said I had changed after the baby. He said he felt trapped, like he lived with a roommate instead of a wife. Then he asked whether Bertie thought I would manage on my own if the marriage ended. Not whether we should try counseling. Not whether there was a way to fix things. Whether I would manage after he left. Bertie said he also brought up the house, talking about fairness and practicality, saying maybe it would be wiser to sell, split everything cleanly, and start fresh before things got ugly. He was not sounding out a thought. He was rehearsing a story. Hearing that did something colder to me than the video had. The video showed betrayal. Bertie gave me premeditation. While I was working doubles and paying daycare and eating standing up because I was too tired to cook for myself after everyone else was fed, Derek had been quietly introducing his future abandonment to his family as a reasonable plan. He was not confused. He was building sympathy in advance. I asked Bertie for one thing only. I said I needed her to remember the conversation exactly as it happened, not the feeling of it. I needed the words, the timing, and the order. She straightened in that booth while I said it. Shame stayed on her face, but something firmer came in behind it. She told me she would remember. That same afternoon, the sitter texted that she had Amara at the park for another hour. Derek was out. I parked in the driveway, waited long enough to lower my pulse, then walked straight into his home office. I already knew which drawer I wanted. Weeks earlier, I had seen him shift his forearm over a manila folder when I passed his desk. Small movement. Protective movement. The second drawer on the right opened smoothly. Inside was an unlabeled folder. The first page was a savings account statement in Derek's name alone. Opened 18 months earlier. Balance: $15,860. I read every page. The balance made sense because the paperwork made it make sense. There were regular transfers of $300 and $500, but there were also 3 commission deposits he had told me were delayed, 1 tax refund split, and 2 reimbursement checks from work routed into that account instead of ours. March of the previous year, when daycare increased and I picked up extra shifts, he moved $800 there. In June, when he told me his commission still had not cleared and I paid the mortgage alone, the statement showed a $3,000 deposit 4 days earlier. He had not been struggling beside me. He had been hiding money behind me. There were more documents clipped behind the statements. Restaurant reimbursements, mileage reports, 2 account planning sheets with Tanya's name on the shared hospital portfolio, a legal pad page with projected monthly costs for the Plainfield townhouse. I photographed every page, front and back, making sure every date was legible. Then I uploaded the images to the secure drive and emailed copies to Vanessa from the address Derek did not know existed. Only after I had checked each file did I return the folder to the drawer and line everything back up. A good nurse learns early that evidence is only useful if you do not contaminate it. On the desk sat a framed family photo from Amara's first spring. She was 6 months old, round-cheeked and startled by the camera. Derek was grinning. I was smiling off to the side of the frame with Amara against my chest. I remembered that day clearly because I had returned to work 12 weeks after giving birth. My leave had been shorter than it should have been, and Derek's job was in one of its slow stretches again, which meant my paycheck carried us. I had worked 10 hours that day in compression socks with my body still not fully my own. I came home and found music playing, takeout on the counter, and a man in a good mood because his team had won something internal. Someone handed me my daughter and said smile, so I smiled. I looked in that picture like a woman who had everything handled. Maybe that was the first lie even I believed about myself. A few days later, Derek came home with Thai food and the easy energy of a man who still thought his life was intact. He announced the dishes while unpacking them, as if he were doing something generous. Pad Thai for him, curry for me, spring rolls to share. He asked whether the sitter had brought Amara back. He complained about traffic. He thanked me for handling a plumber call he had forgotten. I set plates on the table and answered him like a woman whose husband had not been building a second account and a second address. Every normal exchange became part of my strategy. I wanted him relaxed. I wanted him to keep underestimating me. Vanessa and I spoke twice more before I confronted him. By then I had enough to file. Video evidence, documented spending, proof of the hidden account, reimbursements diverted away from marital funds, Bertie's statement about September, and phone records tying Tanya to his late-night calls. Vanessa prepared a petition along with temporary financial restraints so large assets could not be moved once he was served. She also reviewed the workplace issue with me. Derek and Tanya's relationship did not matter to his employer because it offended me. It mattered because they were on the same client chain, disclosure rules existed for that reason, and at least 2 dinners appeared to have been billed to work as client development expenses. Facts, not fury, Vanessa said. Facts survive. So I wrote a short complaint to Derek's company compliance office and attached only what I could support. The reimbursement dates, Tanya's role on the same regional hospital portfolio, and one still frame from the home video with the metadata preserved. I did not speculate. I did not insult either of them. I stated that there appeared to be an undisclosed personal relationship between 2 employees working on overlapping healthcare accounts, and that several expense submissions connected to those dates seemed mischaracterized. Then I sent it. I did not file that complaint to feel powerful. I filed it because they had built part of their affair on top of professional rules they assumed no one would ever check. 3 days later, Derek decided the timing suited him. Amara was asleep. The dishes were done. The kitchen smelled faintly of soap and rice. He sat down across from me at the table, folded his hands, and took a preparatory breath so practiced that I could see the outline of the speech before he began. He said we needed to talk about us. Then he delivered exactly what Bertie had described, only smoother now. He said he had been unhappy for a long time. He said we had grown apart. He said he loved me and always would but was not in love with me anymore. He said maybe I had felt it too and just had not wanted to say it. He said we needed to think practically for Amara's sake and maybe start fresh before things got complicated. I let him finish. Every word, every pause, every carefully measured note of reluctant reasonableness. When the kitchen went quiet, I looked at him and said I knew about Tanya. Nothing in his face exploded. His chin lowered a fraction. His fingers tightened. The air changed. I told him I had video of her in my house with our daughter asleep down the hall. I told him I had the account statements from his office drawer, the reimbursements, the phone records, and a witness to the story he had been telling his family since September. Then I slid Vanessa's packet across the table. He stared at the letterhead without touching it. After that, he did what weak men do when the script fails. He blamed distance. He blamed my shifts. He blamed the atmosphere in the house, my exhaustion, my seriousness, my attention being divided, all the conditions he had benefited from while I was keeping our lives upright. He said Tanya made him feel seen. He said he had not meant for it to go this far. He said he had been trying to find the right time to talk. He offered enough true-sounding half-lies to confuse a woman who had not done her homework. I had. I told him he could feel however he wanted, but he was not going to build a second life on my labor and then call the collapse mutual. I told him the house was no longer a conversation between us. It was a matter for attorneys now. I left him in the kitchen and went down the hallway to Amara's room. The orange nightlight washed the crib, the glider, and the little blanket pile at the foot of her bed. I sat in the chair we bought when I was 7 months pregnant, the one I had assembled myself on a Tuesday while Derek claimed a work happy hour had come up last minute. I watched my daughter sleep and felt something I had not felt in years, certainty without apology. Not triumph. Not relief. Certainty. The argument inside my own mind was over. The truth had remained standing after every excuse was cleared away. Derek spent the next morning on the phone. I could hear his voice moving from urgent to flat as he paced between the kitchen and the patio. I fed Amara oatmeal. I packed her extra clothes for the sitter. I texted Vanessa that the confrontation had happened and asked when service would go out. She replied that the papers would be filed that afternoon and the restraining notice on marital funds would follow. Derek tried once to approach me directly while I was buckling Amara into her car seat. He asked whether I really wanted to do this. I asked which part he meant, protecting my child, documenting the money, or refusing to sponsor the lie any longer. He stepped back without answering. He moved into the guest room first, then into a furnished short-term apartment 10 days later after Vanessa secured temporary orders preserving the house and routine for Amara. Nothing about those early legal weeks was glamorous. It was paperwork, calendars, affidavits, and scanned files at midnight after a shift. It was me sitting on the floor cross-referencing statements while Amara napped. It was Derek's lawyer trying to soften the hidden account into a harmless savings cushion and Vanessa returning the phrase with dates and numbers until the cushion looked exactly like what it was. Money siphoned away while I covered the family. Calm is a hard thing when it is precise enough. The compliance review at Derek's company took 6 weeks, which felt much more believable to me than any fantasy of instant justice. Institutions move at the pace of liability, not emotion. I did not chase updates. I let the process exist off to the side while the divorce moved through its own channels. I learned the outcome later through disclosures and through the sudden changes Derek's lawyer wanted treated as background. Derek had been removed from the hospital portfolio. His promotion track was suspended. A formal conduct warning went into his file. Tanya was reassigned off the shared accounts and transferred to another regional office after the review closed. None of it was dramatic. It was administrative. That suited me. Tanya called me once. Her number lit up on my kitchen counter while I was cutting fruit for Amara's lunch. I recognized it from the wireless logs before I even reached for the phone. For half a second I looked at her name and imagined the kinds of sentences she might have prepared. An apology meant to clear herself. Anger that I had involved the company. Some explanation designed to make me a participant in cleaning up the mess she had helped bring into my home. I let it ring until voicemail took it. Then I blocked the number and finished cutting strawberries. There are conversations that lower you simply by requiring your presence in them. I had no interest in lowering myself for her. Mediation happened 3 months later in a beige conference room with bad coffee and an overworked copier down the hall. Derek arrived in a navy suit that made him look like he still believed presentation could rescue substance. Vanessa laid out the evidence in a sequence so quiet it almost sounded polite. Hidden account. Diverted commission deposits. Reimbursements routed away from marital funds. Fieldcrest charges. Townhouse brochure. Bertie's September statement. My documented share of the mortgage, daycare, and household spending during the exact months he was building that account. Derek's lawyer began the morning talking about fairness and mutual strain. By lunch, he was asking more careful questions about the exact value of the diverted funds and how quickly Derek could refinance his share out. The Reasonable Man Act had finally met numbers. The final settlement was not magic. It was better than magic because it was real. I kept the house, subject to refinancing within 18 months. I received primary residential custody of Amara, with Derek getting a regular parenting schedule that protected her routines. Child support was based on actual income, not the softened version he first floated. The hidden account and diverted reimbursements were treated as marital funds he had improperly withheld, which increased my share of the property division and contributed to attorney fee reimbursement. Derek kept part of his retirement account. I kept my pension. Neither of us got everything. He simply lost the ability to turn my sacrifice into his escape fund. When Vanessa called to say the papers were signed, I was standing in the supply hall at work between a medication pass and a physician update. She read the final terms in that steady voice lawyers use when they know relief can make people cry in public places. I thanked her, leaned against the cinderblock wall for one long breath, and then went back to my patients because children still needed care even on days your own life rearranged itself. That was one of the things I liked best about nursing. Reality never stops for your personal drama, which forces you to remember you are still capable inside it. The last thing I needed was not legal. It was narrative. Derek had been building a sympathetic version of himself in other people's minds for months. I wanted that version to die where it started. So I asked Bertie and Derek's mother to meet me at Bertie's house the Saturday after the settlement. I asked Derek to come too. Bertie set out water and nothing else. No coffee. No casserole. No false hospitality to soften the task. Derek's mother sat on the sofa with her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles showed white. Derek took the chair nearest the window like a man who wanted an exit. I sat where I could see all of them and told the truth once, in order, without embellishment. I told them about the video. I told them about Tanya standing in Amara's doorway. I told them about the hidden account, the diverted money, the townhouse brochure, and the way Derek had gone to Bertie in September asking whether I would manage on my own before he had spoken honestly to me once. I laid out the timeline the way I would lay out a patient chart: date, event, consequence, source. Derek's mother covered her mouth halfway through. Bertie never once looked at him. She stared at a point just past his shoulder like a woman grading a final failure. Derek tried to interrupt twice. The first time I kept speaking. The second time his mother told him to be quiet. After that, he said nothing. When I finished, the room stayed silent for several seconds. Then Derek's mother asked whether there was anything she could do now. She was crying quietly by then, not because she doubted me, but because believing me required her to rearrange her son in her own mind. I stood, picked up my purse, and gave her the only true answer I had. I said she could raise better men and believe women sooner. Bertie closed her eyes when I said it, not in disagreement, but in recognition. Then I thanked her for the room and walked out before anyone could ask me to stay longer than truth required. 14 months later, the coffee was hot when I drank it. That sounds small until you have spent years drinking everything lukewarm, because someone else always came first. On a Saturday morning, I sat at my kitchen table while Amara colored a purple elephant with the seriousness of a child handling state business. The living room wall behind me was painted a deep terracotta I had wanted since before we moved in. Derek used to call it too much. I had it painted the second week after the refinance closed. It was not revenge. It was simply the first visible decision in that house made entirely for my comfort. 3 months before that Saturday, I was promoted to charge nurse. My unit director slid the folder across her desk and told me she thought I had been ready for the role long before I could fully step into it. I signed the paperwork, thanked her, and after work bought myself a pair of small gold hoop earrings from the department store near the hospital. They cost $83. I paid without flinching because the money was mine and the choice was mine, and there was no hidden second ledger attached to it. Small things feel different when they are not subsidizing someone else's deception. Claudette and I developed a monthly dinner ritual after everything settled. Never at Fieldcrest. We found a place across town with good lighting and warm bread, and eventually the hostess started seating us at the same corner table without asking. One night Claudette laughed so hard she knocked over the bread basket, and I laughed with her until my eyes watered. A woman at the next table smiled over at us, and I remember thinking that the version of me Derek had tried to name into existence was gone now. I was not too serious. I was not absent. I was not difficult to love because I worked hard and noticed things and expected honesty in return. In October, I walked Amara into her new preschool with a backpack nearly as big as she was and shoes that lit up when she stepped. She held my hand for half the walk and then let go because something colorful in the hallway caught her attention. At her classroom door, She found the cubby labeled with her name, hung up her backpack, and turned around once to make sure I was still there. When she saw me, she gave a quick wave and went right back to what mattered next. I stood in that doorway a few seconds longer than necessary and felt a lightness so physical it was almost another form of breath. Not because life had become easy, because it was finally my own. I heard months later that Derek and Tanya had ended things. Claudette passed that information to me over dinner the way people pass weather updates they know will not change your plans. I was not surprised. Affairs thrive in secrecy, in flattery, in stolen hours financed by someone else's stability. They rarely survive daylight, commuting, child support calculations, legal discovery, and the ordinary reality of who people are once the performance ends. Derek rents a one-bedroom apartment now. He picks up Amara on Wednesdays and every other weekend. He is polite with me, careful even, and I match his tone exactly. No more than courtesy. No less than that. Sometimes people imagine that what freed me was catching him. It was not. Catching him was only information. What freed me was finally believing my own observations without waiting for someone else to approve them. Derek mistook my quiet for passivity. He mistook my restraint for blindness. He mistook the fact that I did not perform every wound out loud for weakness. That was his first mistake. His last mistake was believing that if he left carefully enough, I would keep carrying his version of events after he was gone. I did not. I carried the facts instead. They were lighter. He never understood the difference between being watched and being known. He thought because I was not shouting, I was not seeing. He thought because I kept the house running, I would keep his lies running too. But by the time he finally looked up and realized the story he had written for me was over, I had already stepped out of it. I was no longer trapped inside his explanation of my life. I was standing in my own kitchen, drinking hot coffee, with my daughter at the table and the morning coming clean through the windows. For a long time I thought survival looked like endurance. It does not. Sometimes survival looks like attention. Sometimes it looks like proof. And sometimes it looks like a woman refusing, quietly and completely, to disappear from what she knows. If you enjoyed this story, please like, comment, and share this video with your friends. Subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a powerful story drop.